September 4, 2025 was an important day for video games. It saw the release of one of my most anticipated games of the year. A game that I had quite high expectations for, but somehow it managed to break all of them. A game that rewards exploration in special ways and has some of the greatest world building in video games. A game that most likely will be my game of the year 2025. And that game is, of course, Hell Is Us. Hell Is Us is a third-person action game with a heavy emphasis on exploration and puzzle solving. It is made by Rogue Factor, a relatively unknown smallish studio from Montreal, and directed by the art director of Deus Ex Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. The game is set in a fictional country of Haiti, an isolationist nation that has been totally cut off from the rest of the world. Nobody goes in or out, and now it is suffering a brutal civil war between two religious factions of the country, the Palamists and the Sabinians. The game's protagonist Remy is from Haiti, but he was smuggled out of the country as a child, and for years he has been looking for a way back to find his parents and to understand his home country better. So disguised as a peacekeeping officer, he finally finds his way in, and to his surprise he not only finds the country torn by the civil war, but also a land ravaged by mysterious monsters connected to an ancient cataclysmic event that he starts to unravel. Sounds like a gripping premise on paper, but holy shit, they nailed the execution. This game has some of the best world building I've ever come across in a video game. Starting with the Civil War, it is depicted in such harrowing ways that makes your skin crawl, and I like how both sides are depicted being able to commit atrocities. It really feels like an evil versus evil and touches on some very disturbing subject matter. Like when you first meet a group of Sabinians occupying a Palamist village, you're like, Jesus, these guys are brutal. I'm now kinda rooting for the Palamists. And then later on, when the roles are reversed, you can see the Palamist being even more evil. You can feel the generational animosity between the two in such concrete ways, especially when you can discuss these subjects with every major NPC, giving you different viewpoints on the conflict. Even this little Palamist girl you find hiding in an attic being so blindly hateful towards the Sabinians was so fucked up.
Miss Haley was right about them. They're not people.
Then, of course, there are parts of the population that doesn't want anything to do with this conflict, caught in the middle. You can try to help some of them with these good deeds, as the game calls it, but if you fail, it can lead to some heartbreaking outcomes. It's such a sad backdrop for the story, but the writers balance it just on the edge so it doesn't fully fall into misery, as the story keeps you focused on the more paranormal and the historical side of things as well. The history is so well established into the world where it feels natural, and as you delve deeper into the lore through your investigation, you start to actually understand that this conflict between the groups has been going on for centuries. It weaves together everything so seamlessly that it made this totally fictional country of Haiti feel so real in the midst of the paranormal mystery that is at the core of the game. Everything from mythical creatures of legends to the tales of ancient kings and queens to secret societies and modern politics ties together brilliantly. The level of cohesion in the complex subjects is just on another level. The way the story and the mystery of Haiti is presented is very interesting. You get the core of it through the main objectives and the cutscenes, but to really appreciate the story, you have to do it on your own through documents and environmental storytelling. I totally know that is not everybody's cup of tea, but when it's crafted this well, I'm all for it. In some ways, it reminded me of Remedy's Control, that similarly had a good main story, but the world building around it elevates to another level where I'm so invested to learn more and more and more. And in Helisas, it's not just about reading documents, it's about piecing together all the different concepts to create this bigger picture of the overarching history of Hadia, from the prehistoric nomadic tribes to the modern political and financial intrigue. It honestly feels like the game is using real pedagogic methods to effectively teach the player. The game also trusts its players, so you are not spoon-fed every piece of information, and it is up to you to decide how deep you want to dive, and the game rewards you for it with even more information, as by finding enough interesting artifacts, you get these full articles written by your journalist friend on different subjects of the history. And that trust in player translates to the gameplay as well, as a big point of this game is that it doesn't have maps or quest markers. You simply need to figure out where to go next with different clues that you find, or by talking to NPCs.
Where's the ON outpost?
The outpost is northeast of here, on the outskirts of town. It's on the street behind the blacksmith's forge.
I talked a bit how much I've started to dislike the heavy hand-holding in games in my Atomfall review earlier this year, and Helisas once again proves it. It feels so good to figure out things on your own, and honestly the game does an amazing job to guide you. I personally never felt lost in the game. The game either makes the next step easy to figure out naturally, or you end up stumbling on it when just exploring the areas, as there are just the right amount of optional mysteries and the previously mentioned good deeds that exploration always feels rewarding. What also really helps is that the game is split into multiple smaller regions, so you never get overwhelmed with a massive open world. I love how they play with the scale of these areas, as they range from bigger swamplands and forests to small neighborhoods or even just an individual government office building. The scale and the visual style of each region keeps things fresh, and revisiting places never felt like a chore. And you will be backtracking through areas quite a lot, as the mysteries of Hadia are rarely in one place. You might find a clue or an item in one region to help you solve a mystery or a good deed in another region. For the most part I found it quite easy to keep track of everything, but every now and then I did forget what some item was for, and had to really roll back time in my brain to remember. The puzzle solving is at the core of the Helisas gameplay experience. A lot of the puzzles are quite traditional code solving to get a code for a keypad, a password for a computer, or a series of symbols for an ancient tomb, but I did appreciate the variety of ways the game presented its clues. For example, for this one save I had to figure out a series of important numbers from the life of a Hadia's historic ruler, so not only was I cracking the save to get a clue for my next objective, the game was also sneakily teaching me more about the history at the same time. Same with this pressure plate puzzle that was pretty much a quiz about the goddess Cetheris, who is in the middle of this whole mystery. That's the cohesion I was talking about, actually combining gameplay and world building together. It's so cool. The basic puzzle solving remained fun the whole way through, but the definitive highlights of the game were the more grandiose main story puzzles, which there are few throughout the game, and solving those never failed to make me feel good. One reason the puzzle solving feels so good in this game is that the protagonist Remy is actually quite quiet. Unlike so many game characters that don't know when to shut up and are actually spoiling puzzle solutions 5 seconds into solving it, I'm looking at you Aloy and Mimir, but luckily Remy keeps it silent. Which is a double-edged sword for me, because he is played by probably my favorite voice actor Elias Tufexis, so normally I would love to listen to him talk, but outside of the conversations, in which he is already a man of few words, he says nothing, and I kinda love that.
How about I give it back when I no longer need it?
I would advise against it.
It's just too convenient.
Overall, Remy's characterization is very peculiar. For the large part, he is portrayed as a very cold and distant person. One person even characterizes him as a high-functioning sociopath, but every now and then you get glimpses to his humanity and the conflicting feelings he is struggling with when it comes to the people around him, his connection to his family, and Haiti at large. Quite early on, Remy does run into this journalist Tanya, who provides a good contrast to Remy without being too wordy herself. She ends up joining him to act as his woman in the chair, researching items and providing additional context, while Remy is out in the world solving puzzles and fighting enemies.
I know I don't look it, but I have my uses. Face it, you wouldn't have gotten far without me.
All right. You can tag along.
Good.
And that does bring us to the least interesting part of the game, the combat. And the combat in Hell Is Us is solid. It's not going to wow you in any ways, but it is engaging and just varied enough where it never got into the way of the better parts of the game. Combat is mostly quite traditional melee action with couple different weapon options. I prefer the fast dual access for most of my playthrough, sometimes switching to the pole arm or the greatsword for some variety. Before you can level up a weapon, you have to imbue it with an emotion like grief, rage, ecstasy, or terror. If that sounds weird, don't worry, it very much relates to the lore. The emotions don't directly affect the stats of the weapon, just altering its appearance, and most importantly, that defines which glyphs you can attach to it. The glyphs act as your special combat abilities, like a ranged projectile or a lasso to stun and pull in enemies. You can also use your drone in combat to distract enemies or pull aerial moves. And the basic enemies come in 5 different varieties, and I absolutely love the unnerving hollowed design. To add to the variety, some of the hollowed are connected to these weird geometrical haze enemies that represent the same emotions you used with your weapons. With these, you first need to defeat the haze before you can hurt the basic enemy, in which the drone's distraction usually comes in handy. I think the combat has a good amount of depth, but the issue is that the game never forces you to use all the features, mostly due to the very lenient active healing system where you can just heal yourself after a combo. Overall, the fights are decent fun, bit repetitive, but I never felt that it was hurting my overall experience because it's not why I was playing the game, and everything else was just so amazing. One thing I really appreciated is that you can actually get rid of enemies for good, because I think having to kill them every time you revisit a place could have gotten old. And the enemies are tied to time loops, these weird black anomalies that form in places where humans have committed especially heinous acts of violence, and those dark emotions feed the hollowed enemies. So killing the guardians of the time loops and then closing it with a special item gets rid of it, and the enemies in that area no longer respawn. Once again, connecting gameplay functions to the overarching narrative and lore is very well done. Wrapping all this brilliance together is the great visual and audio presentation. Visually, the game is very moody and uses fog and lightning to advance sometimes too well, because I don't do well with horror stuff, but for the most part it stays on the edge without being too scary for me. Same goes for the audio design, it is very unnerving and creates amazing atmosphere, although I hate how they use like creaking windows and rustling trees to fuck with you. The cherry on top is the really solid soundtrack that is mostly electronical synth tracks that blend together with the rest of the audio design. Hell Is Us was a very special game for me. It is not perfect by any means, but it feels like something that was made specifically for me. And honestly, that is the greatest feeling a video game can achieve. For example, I love learning about history, and the game does such remarkable work with its world building that I've never been this invested in the history of a fictional country, which blew my mind. It spoke to me in ways not many games have in recent memory, and that's why I do feel the urge to sing its praises to everyone. Especially considering it kinda got overshadowed by this other game that released on the same day. And that is kinda sad. I really do hope the game finds its audience, because I would love more of this. Not necessarily a Hell is Us 2, even though there is room for more, but just something similar in nature in both gameplay and storytelling. Hell is Us is kinda difficult game for me to generally recommend, because many things I loved about it is very specific. But if you do love weird stories, puzzles, intricate world building and history, it might be something you would also love. Oh, and like I mentioned before, it shares a lot of DNA with the Remedy games in some ways, so if you like those, there could be something here for you as well. And finally, I just want to say thank you Rogue Factor for this game. It was a very special game experience for me, and please continue to do cool and weird games. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found the video interesting. Hell is Us was such a cool game that I couldn't wait to write and edit a video on it. If any of this sounded interesting to you, make sure to check out the game. It really deserves more eyes on it. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more. Thank you and have a great day.